everybody? What's happening, everybody? Friday, June 20th, 2025. My name is Kevin Smith. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Loud Majority Live. We got a jam-packed show for you guys today. President Trump meets with Steve Bannon on Iran as tensions continue to flare up in that situation. We're going to be talking a lot about Iran today. About exactly how these things escalate, about exactly how we go from strife to conflict to war. And today we're going to be talking a lot about a book that I think every person who goes into American politics should read. It is called The Guns of August. It won the Pulitzer Prize back in 1962, back when those sort of things mattered. We're going to be talking about that today, and it's all about World War I and how exactly World War I happened and how we can draw parallels not only to this conflict, but to conflicts from the past. It's an incredibly powerful book. I think everyone should read it, and I don't get anything for it. I think everyone should give it a read. Once again, The Guns of August. We're going to be talking about that a lot today. Also, illegal immigration continues to go down all across America as over 1 million illegal immigrants have self-deported. Unfortunately, many of the ones who have many of the ones who have chosen not to self-deport are still the illegal aliens that need to go because they are criminals. And we're going to talk about a couple of them today. Gavin Newsom gets dealt a serious blow in the courts in terms of these LA riots, and populism continues to take over all over the world. Guys, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place. Giddy up. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get this. Where are we at here? Where's my chat? I want to say, I'm curious, actually, chat. Has anyone read this book? Has anybody read this book, The Guns of August? I'm curious to see what you guys, if anyone has read it before, if anybody's even heard of it. I think it's an incredibly powerful book, and everyone should read it. As we get rocking, as we get rolling here today, guys, head on over to lfatv.us. That's lfatv.us. That is your home base, your mothership, your landing pad for all things LFATV related. Check out the LFATV store. And while you guys are there, consider becoming a monthly donor over at lfatv.us. That is the best way to support this network and everything we've got going on over here. Guys, once again, that's lfatv.us. Absolutely. Kelly, how are you? David Hall, how are you? Jeanette, what's going on? God Chick, hello. Moose, what's happening? Critter, hello. Deb, what's happening? Let's dive right on in. So, look, obviously there has been a schism, a rift, a whatever you want to call it, in the Trump coalition over the war with Iran. Obviously, and I'm not talking about the neocons. I'm not talking about the Lindsey Grahams, who I saw a clip of last night. If you didn't want to punch Lindsey Graham in the face, you're certainly going to want to after you see this clip. In one of the most irresponsible rants I think I've ever seen. But there's certainly been a rift. There's been a rift here. There's been a rift among friends. There's been a rift among people who know each other on what to do with this Iran conflict. Obviously, people like Tucker, people like Matt Walsh on one side. Then you've got much of the MAGA influencers on the other side, the Laura Loomers. Many friends of mine, people that I like, people that I consider good people. The schism is very real. Which is why I'm happy that President Trump is sitting down with Steve Bannon ahead of his decision to whether or not to attack Iran. Now, look, I'm not saying you got to agree with Steve Bannon. I'm not saying you even have to like Steve Bannon. That's not really, I happen to be a fan. What I'm saying is, don't bet against him. Because I think a lot of the reason why a guy like Steve Bannon has been as successful as he is because every time people bet against him, they tend to come out on the losing side, whether it's Eric Cantor, whether it's Megyn Kelly. She made her way back, but someone like Eric Cantor, who got beaten by a 7th grade English teacher after Steve Bannon went after him. He was with President Trump from the get-go before most people, at least in the political lexicon, got on board. So I'm curious to see this interview between the anti-interventionist wing of the movement and the Trump administration. I'm really curious to see what happens with that. Let's dive into this from the Post-Millennial. Steve Bannon visited the White House yesterday and had a private lunch with the president just hours before he announced he would delay his decision on whether or not to launch a strike on Iran, reported by the Daily News. The lunch, rescheduled after Bannon was reportedly ill, comes at a critical moment as Trump weighs U.S. involvement in Israel's military campaign. There's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran, Trump said in a statement. I'll make that decision within the next 2 weeks. Trump's new 2-week timeline marks a significant departure the previous timeline, which was anticipated by many pundits just to be a couple of days. The pause also coincides with planned talks between European diplomats and Iranian officials this weekend. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff is not expected to attend. Bannon, a former White House advisor and key voice in the anti-interventionist wing of the Trump movement, has repeatedly warned against U.S. involvement in the Middle Eastern conflict. His meeting with Trump comes as internal debates sparked up in recent weeks among Trump allies over the extent of the American engagement in avoiding involvement in what has been called forever wars. Yeah, I want to be clear. I am anti-war in 99% of cases. War ought to be the final boss when all other options have been exhausted. I think diplomacy ought to win the day. Obviously, Israel has been in conflict with many countries over the last couple of years. And as I've said numerous times, if they want to go do that, do it. Not my monkey, not my circus. Now, I think that American taxpayers should get a say, considering we are doing a lot of the funding of this, and I remain against foreign aid in all cases. I make no apology about that. Now, with that being said, I want Israel to win. I want many things to happen. I want my friends to have successful homes. That doesn't mean I have to pay their mortgage. And this is a critical distinction that needs to be made. A critical distinction. On yesterday's show, I pissed off a lot of people when I talked about Iranian nuclear weapons. I said that, do I blame the mullahs or the Ayatollah for wanting a nuclear weapon? No. They've seen many regimes, particularly in the Middle East, go under once giving up their ability to make nuclear weapons. Whether it is Assad or Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein, that's what they saw. If we're looking at this from their perspective, why would they give them up? Why would they? If nothing else, for the natural deterrent of things. However, in this administration, we have done a very good job of dispelling many of the neocons. The big problem is, many of them still occupy places of significant authority. People like Lindsey Graham. People like Brian Kilmeade. People like Mark Levin, who I've been a fan of for a long time. Very interventionist. I am very not. I very much do not want Americans to get entangled in these foreign conflicts. I've always been against forever wars. And as I said on yesterday's show, if you're going to start a war, you better know how to finish it. And the problem is many of the people who are talking the loudest in this situation seem to not really care, both on the right and on the left. Does Iran chant death to Israel? Death to America in their parliament? Absolutely. Are there the anti-Israel forces on the radical left promoting this as a reason for us to stay out of it? Yes. Here was one of them on MSNBC saying that death to America doesn't actually mean death to America.
He didn't want to hear from them.
Well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is. I mean, your point that you made before, Katie, it speaks to this, which is that he's not explaining what the issues are for America. What are the issues for America? Why is it a foundational issue for Trump that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon? Why is this something that the U.S. should be involved in? Why are we allied with Israel?
He says because they chant death to America.
They chant death to America. I went to Iran in 2014. I was sitting at a rally. These young guys were chanting death to America. I had a minder. I said, what are they saying? They're saying death to America. They finished the chant, and two young men came over and said, are you American? I said, yes. We want to welcome you to our country. We love American culture and love American movies. They wanted to talk about all these things. Iran is the most Western nation in the whole Middle East. We have much more in common with them than a lot of countries that we do have alliances with. Well,
now, the only thing more preposterous than that claim is that hat. But the bottom line is, you found two guys outside of the parliament that said, we love America. Yeah, well, I'm going to listen to what's happening inside the parliament. That matters. There are those apologists out there, and then there are people out there like Lindsey Graham. And I want to be clear. I have never, in all my life, heard a more irresponsible, unhinged comment by not by an elected official, because I heard a pretty irresponsible one yesterday. But in terms of geopolitics, if you're still putting Lindsey Graham on television, you should never be allowed in front of a microphone again.
Can you guarantee that? Can President Trump in any form, can you make the commitment that this would not lead to a longer war?
I can guarantee you that if the Ayatollah gets a nuclear weapon, he will use it. I believe that with all my heart and soul. So the men and women who serve, they're the ones going, not people answering a poll. And if you ask them, would you be willing to risk your life to stop the Ayatollah from having a nuclear weapon? All of them would say yes, because it makes their country, our country, safer. So we live in a world where you've got to confront problems. You want to avoid World War III? Learn the lessons from World War II. People in World War II appeased Hitler to the point that it got so much out of hand, we had a world war and 60 million people got killed. So we live in a world where you pay now or you pay later. Let's stop this threat before he gets a nuclear weapon. Let's end this reign of terror. Let's do it now. It's not going to take 20 months, but I can't guarantee you your freedom and your safety unless we're willing to fight for it. I can guarantee you this. If we don't fight for our freedom, we will lose it.
Yeah, well, Senator,
I cannot wrap my brain around what that man just said. It doesn't matter what people say in polls because they're not the ones who are going to go and die. Are you out of your mind? Are you out of your mind, Lindsey Graham? Oh, and by the way, Lindsey, I seriously, like, Fox wants this war to happen in a way that is unconscionable. And I want to be clear. I'll say it now. I'll say it up ways, down ways, left ways, and sideways. I will never support American boots on the ground over this Iranian conflict. Ever. I don't care who does it. I won't. Not one American life should be lost in Iran. Not one. I actually, I can't believe he just said that. From the air-conditioned Capitol. Completely irresponsible. And in just a minute, we're going to go over why it's so irresponsible and the second half of what Lindsey Graham said before we get to that Old Glory Bank.
When big banks decide who gets access to America's financial systems and who doesn't, who do you think gets left out? Middle Americans who proudly wave their pro-America values. Cancel culture in banking is corrosive. It limits your participation in a vibrant, free market economy. Fortunately, you can fight back. You now have the opportunity to invest in the bank that's investing in a fair American banking system, one based in freedom. Ownership in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank, is here. Old Glory Bank is a full-service FDIC-insured bank that's the alternative to overreaching, un-American big banks. We stand for privacy, security, and liberty. We stand for freedom, family, faith, and the flag. We stand for all the values you stand for, and for the values big banks can't stand. So help keep banking in the hands of Main Street, not Wall Street. To invest in Old Glory Bank, go to oldglorybank.com.
Guys, switching banks has never been easier. Head on over to oldglorybank.com and find out how today. That's go to oldglorybank.com and find out how you can switch banks nice and easy today. So we're going to talk about this book now. This book, The Guns of August, which I think every person serving in elected office, at least on the federal level, should be forced to read. This book got very popular in the 90s. Obviously, it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1962, but it got very popular in the 90s because of one of my favorite movies. 13 Days. It's about the Cuban Missile Crisis and what went on inside of the Kennedy administration. Kennedy was very anti-war, particularly after the Bay of Pigs incident, where he was lied to by people like Allen Dulles and the rest of his generals. This book is about what led up to World War I. Not Archduke Franz Ferdinand's nephew dying. No, everybody knows that's what led to World War I. This book goes into what was going through the minds of the people who were involved in the lead up to the war. And in the movie 13 Days, so much so that this is definitely going to get copyrighted for me playing this clip, but I want you to compare and contrast not only the language that is used in this clip compared to the Lindsey Graham clip, but tell me if this bears any resemblance whatsoever to the conflict that we're dealing with right now. Now, obviously, this movie is a dramatized version of what happened, and Oliver Stone made the movie, so it comes from a more left-wing perspective. But just think about this. So this is John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, the special advisor, Kenny Powers, was that his name? I'm sorry. I can't remember his last name. Sitting around the Oval Office, and they're talking about what they can do to stop the military buildup in Cuba. Everybody remembers the Cuban Missile Crisis and how the parallels to that moment are similar to the buildup to World War I. Tell me if you think there's any similarities here.
You know, last summer I read a book, The Guns of August. I wish every man on that blockade line read that book. It's World War I. It's 13 million killed. It was all because the militaries of both alliances believed they were so highly attuned to one another's movements and dispositions, they could predict one another's intentions, but all their theories were based on the last war. And the world and technology had changed, and those lessons were no longer valid. But it was all they knew, so the orders went out. Couldn't be rescinded. And your man in the field, his family at home, they couldn't even tell you the reasons why their lives are being destroyed. But why couldn't they stop it? What could they have done? Here we are 50 years later. I think one of their ships resists the inspection. And we shoot out its rudder and board. They shoot down one of our planes in response. So we bomb their anti-aircraft sites in response to that. They attack Berlin. So we invade Cuba. And they fire their missiles. And we fire ours.
And that's how a war starts. Just like that. The question has got to be, at all times, what can we do to stop this from starting? Now, obviously, it started already. But the gradual progression of war only gets worse and worse and worse. It only keeps building and building and building. Need any more proof? Lindsey Graham said, let's look to World War II. And I say, let's look to World War I. Here's a clip from another show, obviously a left-wing show, describing exactly how World War I started.
Ferdinand, who was the nephew of the Austro-Hungarian emperor, was killed by a group called the Black Hand. And because they were a Serbian nationalist society, the empire declared war on Serbia. Then Russia, which was bound by a treaty, was forced to mobilize, which meant that Germany had to declare war on Russia. Then France declared war on Germany, and that was World War I, because the emperor's nephew was killed.
When big banks decide who gets access...
I want to be very clear. That's how wars start. In a 30-second YouTube video. That was World War I. How it ended, that's a very different story. And a lot of people out there, and not enough people, I'm sorry to say, not enough people that I like, not enough people that I consider to be thought leaders in this movement are figuring out, how do we end this? A lot of people out there are talking about how we escalate. And what happens if there is escalation? And what happens if Iran does this? No one is out there asking, how do we fucking stop this? Because a lot of people are going to die. A lot of people have died. And what do we do? What do we do to call off the guns of August? I hope there are people a lot smarter than me trying to figure this out. Because it just seems to me like every day this is getting more and more hot and building up. And pressure is building. You can feel it. You can feel it. So what happens next? You got Lindsey Graham out there saying that nuclear wars is not out of the realm. You got Ted Cruz going on Tucker Carlson making an ass out of himself. Lindsey Graham, a guy I hate. Ted Cruz, a guy I like. I don't know. And I worry that this is going to fracture the MAGA coalition moving into the midterms. I really do. Were we able, in this election, to remove enough neocons, not only from the administration, but from the party? Just think about how much worse. Think about, my God. Think about how much worse this would be if Mike Pence and Lindsey and then John Bolton were in the room for this. Hell, we'd probably already be at war. We'd probably already be at war. Guys, we're going to move on because I could talk about this all day long and, I got the live footage on right now and I worry where this goes. I genuinely do. Guys, we'll be back in a sec. Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our first ever mega sale on overstock clearance and brand new products. For example, save over 50% on this season's flannel sheets. Queen size only $59.98. Kings only $69.98. They sell out fast every year, so order now. Save 20% on our brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one I've worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's, and they're made right here in the USA. Get our 2025 6-piece My Towel sets for only $29.98. Our initial quantities are extremely low, so get them now before they go. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, just $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our first ever mega sale. But wait, remember that $75 free shipping rule? Well, that ship is sailed because right now, every order ships absolutely free.
Guys, head on over to MyPillow.com. Promo code LOUD. That's MyPillow.com. Promo code LOUD for up to 80% off everything on the website. That's MyPillow.com. Promo code LOUD. Now, with that being said, this is absolutely still Donald Trump's party. And we've seen what happens when people, I don't want to say cross him because that's not what's happening here. Disagree publicly, we'll say. We've seen what happens. We saw what happened with Elon. He's kind of working his way back into the good graces. According to multiple reports, Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson spoke yesterday. But this is no doubt still the party of Trump.
This is what we should point out. This is Donald Trump's GOP, not Tucker Carlson's. Now, you mentioned what happens when you go against Donald Trump. I mean, this sort of says it all, right? We've had these fights in the past. We had it between Mike Pence and, of course, Donald Trump over the 2020 election. We had it most recently, Elon Musk against Donald Trump. GOP favorables, pre- and post-Trump fight. Look at this. Pre-fight, Mike Pence, very well beloved by Republicans, an 84% favorable rating. Look at where he is now. 36%. When you go against Donald Trump and you're Republican, you go down. How about Elon Musk? Remember, he was beloved by Republicans. He had a 78% favorable rating with Republicans. But then he fought Donald Trump, and what happened? He went down. The bottom line is this. Donald Trump's favorable rating stayed steady or actually even went up when he won these battles against Mike Pence or Elon Musk. But if you go up against Donald Trump and you're Republican or Republican affiliated, your favorable ratings with Republicans, they go down, traditionally speaking.
Where do things stand right now for the Director of National Intelligence and Tucker Carlson? And again, I want to point out, Carlson's been very public with what he's saying. Tulsi Gabbard, we haven't heard from her in a little bit.
Yeah, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party. The favorable rating among Republicans, you could see it here. Donald Trump beloved, 88% favorable rating among Republicans, near his apex. Now, Tucker Carlson is well-liked among Republicans, but not anywhere in the same universe as Donald Trump at 64%, Tulsi Gabbard, 55%. The bottom line is this. As I said at the beginning, this is Donald Trump's Republican Party, not Tucker Carlson's, not Tulsi Gabbard's. Republicans, traditionally speaking, go along with Donald Trump. And as we saw in that last slide, when you go against Donald Trump, you go down while Donald Trump stays quite high.
And we keep on monitoring where Republican support is for the possibility of strikes. What's the latest you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we see in the data, and I've looked at a number of different polls. They've asked it different ways. but the clear majority of Republicans in any poll that you look, GOP on U.S. airstrikes against Iran, if Iran's pursuing nuclear arms, you see it here. The Republican Party, again, is with Donald Trump, 69% in this particular poll from the Chicago Council that was taken a few months ago, compared to 27% who are opposed. But again, even if you look at the other polling data, it all points in the same direction. Republicans are with Donald Trump on this particular issue, and they're with Donald Trump at large. And when you go against Donald Trump, you go down.
Now, I want to be clear, that last poll happened before this conflict started with Iran. So I'm going to tell everybody to take that with a grain of salt. But look, there's no question you go against the president and you drop in the numbers. And look, I still support the president. I'm going to continue to support the president. I know that we have the right man in power, the right man in the office to do the job. I don't stray from that at all. Not even a little bit. But as I've pointed out over the last 20 minutes or so, sometimes when it comes to war, when it comes to generals and it comes to the military, things spiral out of control and nobody says stop. Nobody wants to look weak. Therefore, no one just says, whoa. Why doesn't everybody breathe? And that's what I think this 2-week pause is in Donald Trump's thinking as he meets with Steve Bannon. Yesterday. I can't wait to watch the interview and talk about it. Steve Bannon has always been somebody who bucked the system, and he's been one of the staunchest supporters of the president since the very beginning. And Steve Bannon is not somebody you want to bet against. Some people believe the reason for the 2-week pause was because of the talks between Bannon and Trump. And I hope that's true. Now, some people believe the 2-week pause is to keep the Iranians on the back foot, that they're not really going to know which way we're coming from, if we're coming, when we're coming, in what sort of way, whatever. But 2 weeks more of peace is 2 weeks more of peace. Hopefully we can get something worked out in that time frame. Because it's important to know that this is going to be a long-term battle. The nationalism, the non-interventionism, the putting your country first populist message is going to be a long-term fight. People like Lindsey Graham, unfortunately, they're not going anywhere. I wish they would. I wish the GOP would back a primary challenger against him. I wish that with all my heart. The problem is, like we saw with Russia and Ukraine, many of them are still fighting the last war, as we saw in that clip from 13 Days. They're not using the future as a reference point. They're using the past. And because of that, a lot of times we continue to make the same mistakes, as I discussed on yesterday's show. Sometimes it is okay to admit that a leader of a country is awful, but what comes after might be worse. Muammar Gaddafi was one of the worst people in the world. But now you can watch open-air slave auctions on YouTube in Tripoli. It is now an open port for African migrants to make their way to the European continent. We got rid of Saddam Hussein, ISIS, international terrorism. We tried to take out the Taliban. ISIS took that over. We then gave it back to the Taliban. Assad, same thing. So the question has to be, what comes next? What comes next? And the problem is, as we've seen with many elected members of Congress, many of them cannot understand that there are not 80 million Republican votes out there. There are 80 million populist votes, 80 million nationalist votes, 80 million votes who want to see the world and America's role in it change for the benefit of America. People who think that judges and tax cuts are the way to American prosperity. And all I've got to say is you're just wrong, guys. You're just wrong. I've said it on the show numerous times that America's national debt is a very serious problem. However, I still support many of the parts of the big, beautiful bill. Because I think long term, it will be a net benefit to allow Americans to keep some more of their money. But there are some members of Congress, one from Rockland County in particular, who thinks he's going to be governor. God almighty, make that not happen. Some of them think that they can hold up not taxing overtime, not taxing tips, tax cuts for seniors. They can hold that up in favor of their biggest donors. We'll get to that in 1 second. Before we do that, here's Jeremy.
Hey everyone, I really hope you are enjoying the program today, and I hope you enjoy LFA TV as a whole, because let's face it, we're not getting any younger. However, if there was a way to slow down our aging and live a little bit longer, would we do it? I think we would. You ever heard of Fatty 15, folks? Well, Fatty 15 is a brand new supplement that has C15 in it. You might ask, what's C15? Well, C15 is the first fatty acid to be discovered in 90 years that actually prolongs your life. Over 100 studies over many years were done on dolphins because these two doctors were in charge of basically increasing the dolphin population. So they started introducing this fatty acid called C15, and what they found was something amazing. The dolphins were living longer, and the dolphin pods were growing bigger. It was an amazing discovery. And now, ladies and gentlemen, you can get C15 introduced into your life to slow down the aging process of your cells. And it's not only going to make you feel and you look younger, but it's going to make your body think it is younger, which means you're going to start doing more things again. There's a thing called cellular fragility syndrome. And cellular fragility syndrome happens as we get older. This is going to reverse it, folks. Fatty15.com/LFA, promo code LFA. That is fatty15.com/LFA, promo code LFA. Get your discount today, folks, and start this new journey to help you live longer. Fatty15.com/LFA, promo code LFA today. Now, back to the program. Thank you very much.
Guys, head on over to fatty15.com and use promo code LFA. What's going on? I'm sure I've pissed off some people in the chat today, and that's okay. You know, that's we're allowed to disagree here. Well, I did see somebody in the chat say that Tucker Carlson was Canadian. He definitely isn't. He's definitely from San Francisco. Like very famously, not really the point. Not really the point. What's going on, everybody? I hope I haven't pissed off too many of you. But hey, that's what I do. That's what I do. So guys, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button as I get a sip. As I did a sip, I did a lot of talking today. Once again, guys, if you are in New York, particularly Long Island, if you're in the town of Huntington, if you're in the town of Smithtown, get out and vote row B. Get out and vote row B. If you're in South Brooklyn, get out and vote for Ina Vernikoff. If you're down here in my neck of the woods, get out and vote for RJ Renna. Early voting is still open here in New York. You've got like 3 days left. Make sure you guys go and do it. Make sure you go and do it. We still love you, even though you're 99% wrong about Iran. All right, well, I guess, I don't know. I like that. Freedom McGroin. I like that. You give us stuff to think about, and that's what conservatives do. I like that. So what do we think? What comes next? And for anyone who thinks I'm wrong about Iran, feel free to be the first to sign up. I don't know. But as I said, there are still oogles of neocons left in this party, and I wish there weren't. I wish we didn't take part in sending some of these awful people to Congress. But we've got to talk about a man named Mike Lawler. Mike Lawler, who, and I told you guys this, I don't like doing that thing where I'm like, oh, look, I'm right again. I don't like doing that. However, I'm right again. Remember last week when I told you that the only way they were going to get the big, beautiful bill through the Senate is if they gave up some spending cuts? And the one spending cut that they would be willing to give up would be the salt tax. And that was going to be a huge problem when it came back to the House because of New York Republicans. And the reason why the Senate didn't care about the salt tax is because there are no blue state Republicans in the Senate. Well, here's Mike Lawler saying he's got enough votes to veto the bill the Senate sends back to the House over the salt tax.
Really going to vote no on this?
Yeah. I mean, look,
You're going to blow up the president's agenda.
I've been very clear from the beginning that I would never vote to pass a tax bill that does not adequately lift the cap on salt. The fact is that salt Republicans in New York, California, New Jersey, we're the ones that delivered the majority for House Republicans in 22.
Actually, you didn't do shit. It was the activist base, but that's neither here nor there.
And again in 24. And if you look at the situation, the fact is that the cap on salt expires at the end of this year. So we're willing to negotiate. We're willing to keep a cap in place, but it has to be reasonable and it has to provide real tax relief to middle class and working class families. The fact is, when people talk about, oh, we're subsidizing bad blue states, the reality over the past 7 years is that 29 states blew through the $10,000 cap. So to revert this back to $10,000 is absolutely absurd, and nobody would ever support that among us salt Republicans. We negotiated in good faith with the White House, with House leadership. We got to a $40,000 number, which will cover almost 90% of my district and districts like mine in terms of making people whole so that they can fully deduct their state and local taxes on their federal income tax return. The cap itself, the reason people took the standard deduction and the doubling of the standard deduction is precisely because one of the biggest things they would itemize is their state and local taxes, their property taxes and their state income taxes. So a lot of New Yorkers were unfairly hurt in this process. We can all agree Kathy Hochul's a disaster. We can all agree New York needs to reform its spending and tax policy. But to double tax New Yorkers or Californians is wrong. And by the way, Republicans have fought against double taxation for years, including on the estate tax.
What do you say to the Senate who says, look, we don't have any sponsors of the salt deduction in the Senate, and by the way, it's not our problem or our fault that Kathy Hochul and the governor of New York, the governor of New Jersey, the governor of California have sky-high taxes. Cut the taxes.
Look, we agree, cut the taxes. But the fact is, when they talk about subsidies, we can get into the game of subsidies and who subsidizes who. A state like South Carolina takes more federal dollars than tax revenue it generates to the federal government, okay? So we can go through that.
That's because South Carolina gets hit by hurricanes, dumbass.
Game, chapter, and verse. But when I look at the totality of this, if unlimited salt, which will come back into effect if we don't pass a tax bill, is a $1.3 trillion hit to the Treasury. So we're saying, look, we'll give you $1 trillion to double the standard deduction. We'll give you $1 trillion to increase the child tax credit. We'll give you $1 trillion to pay for no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. But we're not giving you the full boat. And at the end of the day, this is a very simple game. It's 50 plus 1. You need 218 votes in the House, and you need 50 plus 1 in the Senate. And
all right, but look, I mean,
at the end of the day, that's what this boils down to.
You say, you know, if nothing is done, it's going to go back. I get that. But then it's on you that you allowed the largest tax increase on people that we've ever seen. You comfortable with that?
I have negotiated in good faith from day one. And I am still willing to work with my colleagues to get this done. But we are not going to be fleeced in New York when in fact it was New York Republicans and California Republicans that delivered the majority in the House. I won a seat that Kamala Harris won. So this at the end of the day boils down to being able to deliver for my constituents, fight for my constituents, and that's part of the process here.
Earlier in the show, I spoke with your colleague Ryan Zinke, and he said, "Look, a little salt, a little pepper. We're still in the recipe making business here. If it comes back to the House and then the Senate agrees, okay, it's not 40,000, but it's 30,000. Will you agree?"
No.
You're not going to agree even to $30,000 cap?
That's what Ways and Means.
I bet 20.
He's not going to agree to a $30,000 cap. Let's play a little game, guys. Houses on Long Island with $30,000 property tax. Let's play a little game here. I hadn't even thought about this. Let's see. $30,000 property tax. Finding a house. Oh no, that's let's see. I will try to find one of these. You know what? Let's pull up. Let's play a little game here, okay? I'm going to show you what a house on Long Island with $30,000 in property tax. So here we go. Sands Point. Sands Point is one of the richest places in America. One of the richest places in America. Let's see. Property details. Does it list the taxes? It should list the taxes. Let's play a little game here. Boom. Property taxes. All right, you guys ready for this? Mike Lawler is ready to veto the big, beautiful bill. The big, beautiful bill. Unless this house gets to write off all of its property taxes. So this guy, whoever the hell this is, I have no idea. I just went on Realtor.com. Gets to write off all of his property taxes. This is what we're talking about here. These people are buffoons. This house in Sands Point. Let's go. Here we go. Let's have a little bit of fun. This house in Sands Point has $18,000 in property taxes. So Mike Lawler is saying that unless you live in this palace with a giant-ass backyard, he's going to veto the bill. Here we go. Beautiful home, beautiful home. Let's see here. Let's find another one. Okay, here we go. Let's keep looking. Here. Let's see. Mike Lawler thinks that the person who lives here in the house that looks like the damn house from Home Alone should get to write off all of his property taxes. That is I gotta say, that I wish I was doing this show from that room. If I could make a room in my house, it would look like that one. I gotta be honest with you. They're gonna veto the bill over that one. Border security, tax on tips. All gone. Sagan wants to know if there's anybody to primary them. No, that would be next year. They wouldn't have announced yet. Some of these people just have, DMQ. Look in Plandom, New York, and Manor Haven. Come on. Manor Haven. Yeah. No, that was in Sands Point, where people have owned those homes for 9 generations. These guys just don't have a grip on reality. They don't have a grip. I've said it many times. A maximum salt tax deduction would help a lot of people on Long Island and California and New Jersey. That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. But that's an Albany problem. That's a Sacramento problem. That's a Trenton problem. It's not a Washington, D.C. problem. It just isn't. Guys, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button. Share the video out all over the place because this show has been a little doom and gloom today. I got to say, a little doom and gloom, you know. I definitely was more towards the end is nigh. The end is around. Everyone get your boats because we're all going to sing. So we're going to talk about some fun stuff in just a second. Before we do that, guys, head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out our shop. That is the best way to support this show and everything we've got going on over here. Also, for my Long Island audience, I'm gonna be making some very, some might say, huge announcements over the course of the next month or so about things that are going to be happening here on Long Island, particularly if you have kids between the ages of 18 and 40. Get ready for that one, guys, because I'm about to blow the lid off this popsicle stand. Guys, head on over to loudmajorityusa.com. That's loudmajorityusa.com. So, the illegal immigrant roundups are continuing. They are continuing in full force as ICE agents outside of New York City are waiting outside of immigration courts to find out whether or not people get denied or not and giving them the proverbial boot. Now, the problem with this is that it's leading to a lot of footage that is going to be used in the oh poor me industry, which will be called the midterms. Here's Ali Scootercaster reporting.
You will go to jail. If you impede, you will go to jail. So, stop. You guys will go to jail if you impede.
I got that one. Not proud though.
This is as protesters are being held back from stopping the arrest of someone who was just denied his immigration claim and is being deported, which is sort of the way it's supposed to work.
You're breaking the law. Where's the warrant? Where's the warrant?
And look, I'm sorry, guys, but if you get denied in your immigration hearing, you get deported. You don't get to just linger around for the next 4 years with your thumb up your ass. But we are starting to see that many people, including over 1 million people, this from the Epoch Times, have self-deported since Donald Trump took office. Roughly 1 million illegal immigrants have left the United States since January, the month President Trump returned to the office, according to a new study by the Center for Immigration Studies. The finding comes as the Trump administration intensifies its efforts to ramp up deportation targeting large cities and so-called sanctuary policies. The Center for Immigration Studies, a nonprofit research group that analyzes U.S. immigration policy, said in a June 19th report that an estimated decline appears to be tied to the Trump administration's efforts. Yeah, I'd say so. To arrive at its estimate, they analyzed monthly household survey data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics' current population survey, focusing on a subset of respondents, non-citizens from Latin America, who entered the United States after 1980. This group, the organization noted, is commonly used by federal agencies and researchers as a proxy for estimating the illegal immigrant population by subtracting estimates of legal present residents from its total. The group calculated a net decline of 957,000 people from January to May. Our preliminary estimate is that there are 14.8 million illegal immigrants in the country in May of 2025, 1 million fewer than we estimated in January of the year before. So it seems like these policies are beginning to work. Now, while we did not vote for endless war, we did vote for this. So we'll take the good with the bad. We'll take the good with the uncertain. Because, let's be honest, we are still incredibly uncertain. Guys, we're going to have fun because I've got something positive to say about the WNBA. Never thought I'd say that. I'm going to introduce you guys to somebody named Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham, who has become an internet sensation over the course of the last week. Why? Did she do something radical? Did she miss 15 consecutive shots like Angel Reese? No. After Caitlin Clark received an aggressively hard foul in one of their games, Sophie Cunningham said she had had enough. So I'm going to show you the foul, and then I'm going to show you Sophie Cunningham's response. So here's Caitlin Clark. She got poked in the eye as she's backing up. She then gets body checked by some other chick. Here she comes. Bam! Knocked to the ground. Well, the next time these two teams played, Sophie Cunningham decided she was going to stand up for a friend. Boom! A scuffle broke out. First off, I want to be clear. Women fighting. You're never going to find me getting upset about that. There we go. That's a nice hard foul. Bill Lambier would be proud. Guys, find you a friend like Sophie Cunningham. And you know what's funny? What's really funny, too, about that foul, is that after that scuffle ensued, Sophie Cunningham was fined by the WNBA. We all laugh when you see professional athletes get fined. You're like, they make enough money, they can pay it. She was fined $400 because of how little the WNBA players make. Guys, find you a friend like Sophie Cunningham. Oh, but by the way, she's also incredibly hot. Just saying. Off topic, but also important, I think. You know what else is important? That Will Johnson is coming up next here on this network, guys. I hope you all have a phenomenal weekend. I hope you guys all have a phenomenal weekend, everybody. I'll be at the Long Beach Street Fair tomorrow and the East Islip Street Fair on Sunday. Come on down and say hello. Until then, everybody, stay loud.